Right now, roughly 1 million miles from where you're sitting, a satellite is holding perfectly still. It isn't orbiting anything. It isn't drifting. It has found the one spot between here and the sun where gravity from both sides cancels out completely. An invisible parking space in the middle of nowhere, where an object can sit for years without spending a drop of fuel to stay put. NASA calls it Lagrange Point 1. It took Isaac Newton's physics, published in 1687, and another 85 years of mathematics by Joseph Louis Lagrange to even prove that spot existed. We've only been able to occupy it since 2015. Its camera has been pointed at Earth ever since, taking a photograph every few hours. It took our best physics and a supercomputer's worth of orbital mechanics to find that exact coordinate. 2 tablets, sitting in 2 separate museums, appear to have already described it. 3,000 years before Newton was born. Neither tablet mentions the other. They were dug up in different places, catalogued by different people, published a world apart, and as far as anyone can tell, never compared side by side until decades after both were already sitting in public collections. And yet, if you lay their translations next to each other, they describe the same thing, in close to the same words. A detail so specific it appears nowhere else in the tens of thousands of Mesopotamian texts we've recovered. No one has ever identified where that shared passage actually came from. To understand how we even have access to material like this, rewind to 1876 and a British archaeologist named George Smith dying of dysentery in Aleppo at 36. A few years earlier, Smith had been hunched over a broken tablet in a London workroom when he became the first person in over 2,000 years to read a flood story that echoed the Bible so closely it upended a generation of theology. He went back to Nineveh to find the rest of it. He was working in part with material that had survived an act of deliberate destruction. In 612 BC, an invading army set fire to the palace library there, trying to erase it completely. Baked clay doesn't burn the way paper does. It hardens. The tablets meant to vanish that night survived the next 26 centuries because someone tried to destroy them. Smith never finished his work, but the collections he helped recover, thousands of tablets, most of them nothing more than tax records and king lists, contained a handful of texts that weren't administrative at all. They described what was above the sky. Picture the sky the way these scribes pictured it. Not empty space, but architecture. A structure with 3 floors, each one a different stone. The bottom floor, jasper, where the stars sit fixed in place like nails driven into a ceiling. The middle floor, a stone whose name survives, though its meaning has been lost for 2,000 years, where a god is described sitting enthroned, facing down. The top floor, a stone the old sources describe as red, marbled through with white and black, like something between polished rock and dried blood. And that's where the watchers are stationed, 300 of them, the text says. No names attached to them, no individual stories, just a number, a location, and one function: to watch. The text doesn't say what they're watching for. It doesn't say what happens to whatever they record, or who they report it to, or whether the watching ever stops. It simply states that it happens, and where. That's the entire passage. And it's the one that shows up almost word for word on both tablets. The scholar who first placed the 2 texts side by side in the study that remains the standard reference on this material could translate every line of it. He could not explain where the passage originated. About the color of that top stone specifically, he wrote that there is no obvious explanation for the tradition at all, in a field that has spent over a century reading nearly everything these civilizations wrote down. Now, the number some versions of this story attach to it. The claim is that the tablet gives the sky's ceiling an exact height, 12,000 of a unit called the Beru, and that converting it lands almost exactly on the outer edge of Earth's radiation shield, the Van Allen belt. Discovered in 1958 when a satellite's instruments picked up more radiation than anyone had expected. The Baru itself checks out. It was a real Mesopotamian unit, roughly 7 miles, built on the same base 60 counting system that still gives us 60 minutes in an hour. What's messier than the online version admits is the target it's supposedly hitting. The Van Allen belt isn't a hard line drawn in space. It's closer to a fog with a boundary that shifts depending on which instrument, which era of measurement, which model you use. Cited distances for its outer edge range from around 36,000 miles out to as much as 84,000.
That's not a bullseye. That's a stretch of sky wide enough to swallow a lot of ancient numbers whole.
So a Bronze Age measurement, applied to the edge of the sky, lands somewhere inside a boundary our own instruments still can't pin down exactly.
Not a smoking gun. Not nothing.
A number sitting precisely where the evidence stops being able to settle anything, which, depending on how you look at it, might be the most honest place a 4,000-year-old guess could possibly land. The tablets keep climbing past the ceiling. Above the top floor, water. Above the water, a place described one specific way, pulled by nothing, falling toward neither the sun nor the earth. Stillness in a universe where almost nothing holds still. That's the exact description of a Lagrange point. Not a metaphor for balance in general, a specific kind of stillness, the kind that only exists at one address between two gravitational bodies. Newton gave us the physics for it in 1687. Lagrange gave us the coordinates in 1772. We didn't put anything there until 2015. The tablets place their watchers at that same address, roughly 25 centuries before anyone had the mathematics to know the address existed.
Coincidence of language or coincidence of physics? The text can't tell you which.
It just keeps insisting on the same 3 details in the same order: a wall, a distance, and something stationed exactly at the one point in the sky that doesn't fall. What can be documented with a real paper trail is what happened to this layered sky after the empire that first wrote it down collapsed. In the 6th century BC, Babylon conquered Judah and marched a generation of its people into exile, into Babylonian cities, absorbing the Babylonian scribal calendar because they had no other option. A few centuries later, a Jewish text called 1 Enoch shows the fingerprints of exactly that contact. Its astronomical calculations follow Babylonian math step for step, and its beings stationed at the edge of the world to watch and record, never to rule, never to intervene. Read like a direct echo of the 300 silent figures on those 2 tablets. From there, the idea kept moving into Jewish mysticism, into Paul's letters and their mention of a 3rd heaven, into Islamic cosmology's 7 heavens. One image, copied for reasons nobody has recovered, carried forward for 2,500 years by cultures we know were genuinely in contact with each other. So here's what's actually sitting in front of us. Once you clear away everything the evidence can't carry. 2 temple libraries on opposite ends of a vanished empire, independently preserving the same description of something stationed at a fixed, motionless point above the world. A source neither museum has ever traced, describing a location that 25 centuries of mathematics would eventually prove is real. And that coordinate isn't empty right now. There's a machine parked there, holding still, lens pointed down at us, doing the one thing the tablet said something would be doing at that exact address: watching and keeping a record. Nobody built it because of the tablets. The physics simply led somewhere the old texts had already pointed. What it's actually for, the satellite, or whatever the tablets thought was there first, is a question neither one answers.